Good day, class! This is once again your friendly teacher in your English subject, Teacher AJ. And we are now on Module 4, Lesson 1. We will be discussing compare and contrast. Our previous topic was able to bring out the best in you. And that was awesome! I know that you are excited to know more, but before going further, try to ponder on this. What are those things that you need to consider in planning your write-ups? Why is it important to know the likeness and differences on the things that we encounter daily? These are some of the few questions that we'll be answering in our lesson. So after going through this lesson, you are expected to first, define, compare, and contrast. Second, write meaningful paragraphs. And third, organize ideas through comparing and contrasting. So as we go through with our new lesson, we believe that in our daily activities, we are facing different kinds of decision making in life. Like what to wear, where to go, what strand in senior high school you choose to, what to explore, or where to go. So are you ready for the new lesson? We believe that in our daily activities, we are facing different kinds of decision making. In this topic, we will learn how to compare and contrast things around us and help us to choose wisely. Now, let us define first what is compare and what is contrast. Compare is taken from the Latin word comparare, which means to liken or to compare. Comparing things means pointing out their similarities or what they have in common. Contrasting things mean pointing out their differences or where they diverge from one another. Contrast derive from the Latin words contra and stare, which means against and to stand. In Middle English, contrast was used for meaning to fight against or to withstand in a battle. For example, apples and oranges are both fruits. They are both foods. Both are made into juice. Both grow on trees. When you contrast items, you look at their differences. For example, apples are red, oranges are orange. The fruits have different textures. Oranges need a warmer place to grow like Florida, while apples can grow in cooler states like Washington. Take note that comparing and contrasting are ways of looking at objects and thinking about how they are alike and different. Comparing things means pointing out their similarities or what they have in common, while contrasting things mean pointing out their differences or where they diverge from one another. For instance, all these items are alike because they are kinds of food, but there are many ways that they are different. For instance, they belong to different food groups. Some must be cooked before eating, and some can be eaten raw. When you write compare and contrast, you will pay attention to these kinds of details. There are two main reasons that people use comparison and contrast. So take note of this. First is to explain. You might compare and contrast kinds of food, for instance, to help someone understand which food need to have refrigerated and which can be stored in a cabinet or in a bowl on the counter. And second is to evaluate. You might compare and contrast kinds of food to show why a kind of food or brand of food is better than another. For example, apples are better snack than butter. When you choose items to compare and contrast, make sure that you choose items that have similarities. You have to choose things that will make sense for comparison and contrast. For instance, it wouldn't make sense to compare a truck with crayon or crayons with a birdhouse. Be sure to compare things that belong together. Compare crayons to pencils or pens, or compare trucks and cars. When you compare items, you look for their similarities, the things that make them the same. Now, the question is, what can you compare and contrast? To compare or contrast, you need two subjects that have a basis for comparison, or the BFC. A basis for comparison is an essential, common element that makes it logical to compare the two items. There are many ways to compare and contrast the features of items, people, events, and etc. Many types of graphic organizers make also easier to examine the similarities and differences, including Venn diagrams, charts, and others. Now, let's have our activity. You are to fill in the missing data in the following Venn diagram, which scientifically compares a butterfly and a moth. Use critical thinking and select only relevant information based on the topic from the following list. Draw the Venn diagram and write all your answers in your answer sheet. These are the items. Has 3 pairs of legs, hatches from cocoon, featured in Rizal's story, hatches from chrysalis, looks pretty, has wings. Congratulations! The previous activities that we had yielded very nice results. You were able to define and differentiate, compare, and contrast. You did a good job in using the graphic organizers and even read the materials well by giving the correct answers. But before going further, I would like to ask you this question. Do you consider comparing and contrasting an essential skill to develop? Very nice answer. Based on your answers, your knowledge of the topic is fantastic. It is remarkable by the way you responded to the questions posted. Now that you've learned a lot from the varied activities in our module this time, let's summarize our lesson by filling in the blanks with the appropriate word or phrase that correctly fits in each of the sentences about compare and contrast. Number 1. Are ways of looking at objects and thinking about how they are alike and different. Number 2. Means pointing out their similarities or what they have in common. Number 3. Means pointing out their differences or where they diverge from one another. Number 4 are the 2 main reasons that people use comparison and contrast. And lastly, a graphic organizer that is made up of 2 or 3 overlapping circles used to visualize the relationship between 2 or 3 sets. Good job! Let us put into practice what you have learned. This is now the gauge of your learning. You are to write a 5-sentence paragraph explaining the differences and similarities of your favorite subjects in the answer sheet for 5 points. Thank you for listening. I hope you have learned something from our lesson today. God bless.